hear, right? We hear it a lot. But is it really being felt? That's the question for this month. And I know it can be difficult for a lot of people this time of year. It brings up memories, it brings up sad times, as well as, people walking around all joyful and everything. There are people that are really sad at this time of year. So for them in particular, this is very, very important to hear that joy is an inherent quality that is within all of us, even if we don't feel it all of the time. All musicians, stay in the room. I'm giving a message, okay? But in spite of everything that's going on this planet, we can still know that within us, even if we truly don't feel it at the moment, there is a quality called joy, which is aliveness, which is so much more than happiness. And I've been using a book, the Book of Joy, that was written with the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Okay, and it comes, joy is so much deeper than happiness, and it comes in all kinds of packages. We're going to get into that today. Is there a difference, actually, between happiness and joy? So let's set the foundation for our exploration today, and it's from that book. It's from this talk called A Joy to Behold. By making important yet very simple distinctions between joy and happiness. As we've already discussed this month, we are inherently joy. That's who we are. That's at the core of our being. Feel it or not, it's there. It's present, like peace is, like love is. All of those infinite potentials are always within us. We are joy incarnate, and we are joy in form. These forms are filled with joy. Because, why? Because we are God the divine. We are God the spirit. We are God in form, human form. That's what we came here to express, being in this human form and having that joy within us. So again, we are joy. And joy is a state of beingness, truly. Joy is who we are, whether we actually are feeling it or not. And happiness, on the other hand, with happiness, there is an opposite. With happiness, it usually depends on getting something, being with someone. It depends on a lot. And when that is conditional. So when that happiness is no longer there, we feel unhappy. With joy, however, it is a permanent state within us. And it gives me such comfort, would be the word, to know that even when I'm not feeling really, really joyful, really happy, I can know at the same time it's within me. It's temporarily, I can't see it, I can't feel it, but it is there, Generally, when things are going well, and they're going our way, we're happy, right? We're usually happy. When everything is all coming together, we're feeling this happiness. So here's how I put two ideas together in my way of thinking. We experience the greatest, the highest, and the best feelings of happiness when we cultivate qualities that stir up those kinds of that stir up the inherent joy that's within us. Just being in nature, just being outside is somewhere absolutely beautiful that we didn't create, it's there. It just uplifts us to another level. It's not based on condition. It's based on that inherent joy within us, that we can feel that. Does that make sense, everyone?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Good. So I'm going to continue. Okay, so I'm thinking of like everybody holding hands and singing that Love Train song. And, because I got to tell you, I was in Manhattan yesterday, in that whole Times Square area, Rockefeller Center, bumper to bumper people. People weren't holding hands. I really had, but this is what I had You didn't look it on the outside, but I had to hold that oneness in my heart as I am almost being trampled by mobs of people looking at a tree. I mean, really, did not feel joy. Didn't feel joy. But I was with people that uplifted me, and the joy came, and it's the only reason I was there, because my son and granddaughter and brother-in-law were going to be in Manhattan on a Saturday before Christmas holidays. So, you know what? I just got myself, but this is the beauty of what we teach. I don't have this written down here, but this is the beauty of what we teach, is because at that time where the last place, I'm from New York, the last place I want to go is Manhattan to Times Square area, which is where we're staying at this time of year. I just don't want to do that. But I had to get myself into a spiritual state and feel the joy of seeing my granddaughter, who's never experienced this before, and being with these people, this family, as we were singing about, and just being there and just being in that place of joy and bringing joy to them. So even though lots of times we don't feel the joy and we're doing things we don't want to do, just turn within and really embrace. I mean, my thing is divine order. Divine order. I'm driving through Manhattan like a kamikaze. Talk about, yeah, blessing everyone, Okay, so the person I'm with will attest to this. I said, look, don't talk to me. I'm in a New York state of mind. You just readjust yourself, but at the same time, that divine order was playing. That divine order was leading the way and making this whole day even possible. So, we experience the greatest and highest and best feelings of happiness when we cultivate those, and I cultivated it yesterday, cultivated that quality of joy within us. And according to His Holiness and the Archbishop, there are certain qualities of the heart and mind that do this. And we're calling them, we're not calling them, they call them the 8 pillars of joy. And this morning we're going to discuss 4 of those pillars of joy in a new light. So we're going to jump right in here. So the first is to gain a wider perspective. This one I really gave this so much thought because it's so important for all of us. So you're going to like this. You're going to feel good after, I hope anyway, at the end of this talk, because hopefully it will expand and there'll be some tools for you to use in this thing called life. So the Dalai Lama said this: for every event in life, there are many different angles. When you look at the same event from a wider perspective, your sense of worry and anxiety reduces, and you have greater joy. Different perspective. And here's his profound example. I have 4 examples for you of a wider perspective. Over 50 years ago, he and his countrymen lost their country. Right? They all became refugees. But that experience gave him new opportunities to see things differently, to be differently on this planet. The Dalai Lama said that he has had more opportunities to meet with different people, different spiritual practitioners and scientists, and these new opportunities arrived because he became a refugee. Could be very meaningful in today's world, in this country. Yeah, lots of refugees. If he had remained at the palace in Lhasa, he would have stayed in what has been often described as the golden cage. He would have been the Lama, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. And as he was sharing this, he sat up stiffly, as he once had done when he sat at that throne that they had him on in Tibet. And he was the head of this forbidden kingdom, as it was called. He went on to say that he preferred the last 5 decades of refugee life. It's been more useful, with more opportunities to learn and experience life. And here is what he is quoted as saying: Therefore, if you look from one angle, you feel, oh, how bad, how sad. But if you look from another angle at some tragedy, that same event, you see that it gives me new opportunities. So it's wonderful, he said. That's the main reason that I'm not sad or morose. There's a Tibetan saying that wherever you have friends, that's your country. And wherever you receive love, that's your home. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. That's your home, wherever you receive the love. Even, I don't care how long it is, there's no time in the divine. We know this. So here's an even wider perspective. Dr. Edith Eva Eger is an amazing woman, and she's a Holocaust survivor. Some say she lost everything in Auschwitz, but to her, she gained an understanding and compassion for others that has given her a beautiful life because she took a wider perspective. And she tells a story of visiting 2 soldiers on the same day at William Beaumont Army Medical Center at Fort Bliss. Both were paraplegics who had lost the use of their legs in combat. And they had the same diagnosis, the same prognosis. The first veteran, Tom, was lying in the bed, knotted in a fetal position, railing about life and decrying his fate. The second, Chuck, was out of bed in his wheelchair, explaining that he felt as if he had been given a second chance in life. As he wheeled through the garden, he realized that he was closer to the flowers and that he could look straight into children's eyes. Now, that is given a wider perspective of the same situation. Many astronauts, here's another example, have reported that once they glimpse the Earth from outer space, when they're so many millions of miles away, this small blue ball floating in the vast expanse, lacking our human-made borders, because that's what they are, they never looked at their personal or even national interests quite the same way ever again. They saw the oneness of life. Many astronauts have professed this. They saw the oneness, they felt it, they saw it, they were part of this experience, the oneness of life. And another example, I have one more example of the wider perspective. So that's just another, that is the 4th one. Okay, another example of how we can see things from a different perspective. It's a choice that we have been given. 4 powerful examples of wider perspective. In fact, we might call it what the Archbishop calls it, a God's eye perspective. We see from a God's eye perspective. Sometimes these things aren't easy, but they're possible. All things are possible because we've been given the gift of choice. And when you've been given that gift, all things are possible. We can see the same situation from many different angles. Which angle are we choosing, really choosing? So that whole God's eye perspective is our first pillar. It's our first pillar of feeling that joy. The second pillar is having humility. The word humility, this is really interesting, actually comes from the word hummus. And it's not the great dip that we all eat. I mean, that's hummus too. It has 1 M, H-U-M-U-S. It means earth. So humility literally brings us back down to earth. Isn't that good? And there's a Tibetan prayer that goes like this. Whenever I see someone, may I never feel superior. From the depth of my heart, may I be able to really appreciate the other person in front of me. Really appreciate them. It's really hard when you're in Times Square this time of year. Very difficult. There's a lot of There's a lot of eyes out there. But it's still possible. It's still possible. So these are all possibilities that we have in our realm. The Dalai Lama and the Archbishop were both insistent that humility is essential. It's essential to any possibility of joy. Stay humble. That's why I say don't believe me, because I don't know. I know what I believe when I stand up here. I know what I'm telling you. I feel this is absolute truth. But that's for everyone to explore and to open to within themselves. Within themselves. I'm not an enlightened species by any means. Drive with me in Manhattan, and you will find this out. Come with me. I gotta tell you, this was funny. This is really funny. So, I gotta tell you this story, because I wasn't gonna, but I'm gonna. Okay. So we're in the elevator finally. It took 20 minutes to get an elevator in Saks. So we're in this elevator in Saks. I pushed my whole group in, which was like 4 or 5 of us. We're getting in. So I'm standing like this, and I'm like, he goes to the next floor, and these people are gonna come in. I said, there's no room. All right, so the door closes. And the person I was with, Steve over there, said, you know the whole elevator's looking at you. So I turn around, and I look at the whole elevator, and I go into a whole discussion with them. And we have a good time. Everybody was laughing. Doors open on my floor. I wish them Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa. I wish them all. And you know what? It's great. It's a spiritual practice. And when you're in an elevator squashed with all these people, right? To turn around and actually look them in the face and have a conversation with them. Keeps you real and it keeps you humble. That's all I'm going to say about that one. So that leads us into our third pillar, which is humor. Laughter, right? There's a Yiddish proverb. What soap does to the body, laughter does to the soul.
Oh, I like that.
What soap does to the body, laughter does to the soul. It cleans it out. When was the last time you had a really, really, really good belly laugh? You feel the joy. That's joy. Laughter blesses our innate joy. It blesses it. So the Dalai Lama visited, here's a story about the Dalai Lama visited Belfast in Northern Ireland after the Troubles had ended. Now those, I don't know if they're fully ended, but those Troubles lasted 30 years in Northern Ireland. And so, you know, the Northern Ireland, the Protestants were in conflict with the Catholics. So he was, this is a true story, he was invited to attend a private meeting where the victims and the perpetrators of violence were present in the same room. The atmosphere was very tense, as the suffering was practically palpable in the room. As the meeting began, a former Protestant militant spoke of how when he was growing up, he was told by the other loyalists that what they did in opposition to the Catholics was justified because Jesus was a Protestant, not a Catholic. Now, the Dalai Lama, knowing that Jesus was, of course, a Jew, he was neither Protestant nor Catholic, he began laughing. You know, you ever see the Dalai Lama? He laughs. He's got this beautiful laugh. So he began laughing so hard that it completely changed the atmosphere of the meeting. His laugh was infectious. And when those in the meeting started to laugh at the absurdity of their prejudice and hatred, they became open to communicate more honestly with each other and compassionately. Laughter may be the direct line, the most direct line between two people. You cannot be in a room and laughter takes place and truly be in a really bad mood. You know, it's the laughter dissipates all of that tension. So when Jesus tells us to rejoice and be of good cheer, he's pointing to a dynamic truth.
Yes.
The potential for rejoicing is already within us. It's waiting to be activated. That's why music is so fantastic, because it activates the joy. This room is filled with joy as Jackie and her musician band were all performing those great songs. I mean, that's joy. That's joy waiting. So we get to our final pillar for stirring up our inherent joy. And this is acceptance. That's one of the biggest ones of all. This is in the book of Joy. It says this: acceptance allows us to move into the fullness of joy. It allows us to engage with life on its own terms rather than rail against the fact that life is nothing as we would wish. It allows us not to struggle against the day-to-day current. Struggling to pay the bills, struggling to find love, struggling to find a job. So much struggle in the world. And it is what it is, right? It is what it is, and we do what we can. We do what we can. There is an amazing scriptural story that speaks to what can happen when we don't accept the what is. And this is what can happen. And it appears in Acts chapter 16, verses 36 to 40. No, 16 to 40. So this is by the apostles. The apostle Paul and company were out preaching, and they came upon a slave girl who was possessed with a spirit of divination, who brought her masters much profit from all of this storytelling that she could do. And this is to quote the scripture. For days this girl followed Paul and company around, crying out, "These men are servants of the Most High God, who proclaim to us the way of salvation." And she did this for many days. Paul got annoyed. He got unhappy with the condition, the circumstance. He wasn't in acceptance, the what is of life. And so he said to the spirit within the girl, "I command thee in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her." And it came out of her. And when her masters saw that she was no longer going to be a money-making novelty, they were very unhappy and grabbed Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace to the authorities. It's all in the Bible. The girls' masters trumped up some charges against Paul and Silas, which the authorities believed. So they were severely beaten and thrown in prison and put in stocks. This is not a happy situation, right? This is not happiness. How much of us have really felt, much like Paul and Silas, that we are being dragged into something and held there against our will? And I mean, you could be feeling it right now that somebody did something to us, and we can't let go of that. They did something to us. That's living in bondage. That's what that is. That's living in complete bondage. So when you feel beaten down, imprisoned by a circumstance, shackled by a condition, this is kind of the metaphysical spin on this whole story. But this all happened because Paul did not live in a place of acceptance. But as I often say here, I believe in divine do-overs. So Paul and Silas did a divine do-over. We can do that at any moment. So what did they do? They did a divine do-over in terms of living in acceptance and stirring up their inherent joy. They didn't just sit there with their heads hung down low, bemoaning their fate. They didn't talk about how they were totally victimized by the system. They didn't rail on and on about how unfair life was or how resentful they were that this even happened to them. No, they accepted where they were. It is where it is. We are where we are. But decided to let the innate joy guide them. And they chose to pray and to sing hymns. Pray and to sing hymns. We can choose any of that. We can do affirmations. We can do that right in the middle of any situation. We are not prisoners unless we believe we are. So we accept what is, and we choose a different way, a wider perspective. And what happened next was that there was a great earthquake. A great earthquake. So great that the foundation of the prison was shaken and all the doors were shaken open. This isn't the prison. And immediately, all things are possible. All the doors were open and everyone's chains were loosed. And all was set free. Not just the two of them, but all of the prisoners and even the guard who witnessed this miracle taking place. They tapped into their innate joy, and that joy has nothing to do with circumstances. That's what we have to remember. Joy has nothing to do with circumstances. The joy that is beyond being happy because this or that happened or didn't happen. And their joy became a causative agent in their lives. I need to say that a bit now because I think that's really profound. Their joy became a causative agent in their lives. So it's been said that joy is the infallible sign of the presence of God. Joy is the infallible sign of the presence of God. As we cultivate the presence of God, this is where we go with that. Those 4 pillars, and we have the other 4 probably next week. 1 is gaining a God's eye perspective. See things differently. Have true humility. Be humble. Humble is a good thing, by the way. Don't be so full of yourself. Realize that laughter is good medicine, and live in acceptance. You can't go wrong with those 4 right there, and we have 4 more for you. So, my friends, how obvious is the presence of God in your life? How much joy are you allowing into your experiences, really? All of these conditions, they come, they go, life happens, we all have them. But that joy is permanent. That joy is always present. If we just remember that, even when we're not in a great place in our lives with our feelings and emotions, remembering those qualities of God are inherent to us, and they are our birthright. And so it is. Amen.